at 6:30 p.m., and visitors may obtain a request to be heard form from staff for any presentation they may have for the meeting. In accordance with policy, the request to be heard forms must be submitted to the secretary within the first 5 minutes of the board meeting in order to be heard at this meeting. Agenda items are subject to reorder and at the discretion of the president. Please attend the entire meeting to ensure you're able to hear any discussion.
Thank you, Shavana. These are awesome. This-
So can I just get up and leave at that point because
Pursuant to Section 841411 of the Nebraska statutes, the next meeting of the Board of Education of Douglas County School District 0001 and the Board of Educational Service Unit Number 19 will be held on Monday, March 5th, 2018 at 6:30 p.m. in the board meeting room of the Teacher Administrative Center, 3215 Cumming Street. The agenda will be kept current and available for public inspection in the office of the Secretary of the Board of Education at the Administrative Building during regular working hours. Pursuant to Section 84-1412 of the Nebraska statutes, the public is hereby informed that a current copy of the Nebraska Open Meetings Act is posted in the board meeting room on the north wall. Please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You were better than Fergie. Vice President America will lead us in reciting the OPS vision and mission statement.
First, our vision: every student, every day, prepared for success. And our mission: Omaha Public Schools prepares all students to excel college, career, and life.
Thank you. Roll call, Mr. Ray.
Cassidy,
Here.
Godding,
Present.
Hallman,
Here.
America,
Present.
Perlman,
Here.
Ryan,
Here.
Scanlon,
Present.
Smith,
Here.
Snow.
Here.
9 present.
Thank you. Moving on to the treasurer's report.
I'd like to submit for your review the treasurer's report. Be happy to answer any questions if you have some.
That's not Sorry, I apologize. Moving on to item F, school spotlight.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the Board of Education, and Superintendent Evans. Tonight, our OPS Proud Spotlight is on King Science Magnet and Technology Center. In February, the King Science Bowl team won the Regional Science Bowl competition. Teams of young scientists from all over Nebraska gathered at Wayne State College for the Nebraska Science Bowl. The bowl, which is funded by the Department of Energy, tests students on questions dealing with science, math, physics, and biology. We congratulate the team, which includes Achilles Bridgeford, Peter Suchstorff, Zach Alhijaj, Jackson Hatcher, and Coach Kubik. I would now like to welcome King Science Magnet Center School Principal Maria Buckner to the podium to give some brief remarks.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mrs. Buckner. I am the principal at King Science and Technology Magnet Center. And one of our slogans is educating future leaders in science and technology. And I really want to say today that we are presenting to you 4 students who are definitely future leaders in science and technology, as they were, I want to say crowned since we're King Science. They were crowned as the Nebraska Middle School Science Bowl champions for 2018. And with that, I want to bring them to the podium so that the spotlight would be on them. Gentlemen. Now, speaking on their behalf to start with would be their captain. It would be Peter Suchstorff.
Hello.
Tell us about your competition.
So my name is Peter Suchstorff.
I'm Jackson Hatcher.
I'm Zachary Alhijaj.
I'm Achilles Bridgeford.
And we went to the Science Bowl competition at Wayne State in Wayne, Nebraska this month. And we got on a bus at Lewis and Clark at about like 5 in the morning. And the competition went throughout the day, and we got back here like 8:30 or 9 o'clock in the evening. In the morning, we had a round robin to place us for the afternoon competition, where we had 3 rounds, and we had to go into a tiebreaker to get into the afternoon rounds. There was 3 teams going for 2 places, and we placed second of the 3 teams. So we were the worst placed team going into the afternoon rounds. The afternoon rounds, we had 5 or 6 rounds, culminating in the finals against Moore from a town north of Lincoln.
How many teams total?
There were 42 teams from
42
around Nebraska.
teams. Awesome. Does anybody else would like to speak?
We had the journey going through this was kind of a stressful day. Every time we had at a point to write, as we were kind of off edge, we were able to break the tension. But we could feel it between each other, or that in every round that it would come close, and that we would feel between each other. But we always were able to kind of figure out between ourselves.
Do you guys have any questions? Or-
Mr. Perlman?
Congratulations, first of all. I'm wondering how you prepared for this. Was this part of a club, part of a class, or both?
We did not prepare at all.
Yeah.
We got on a bus and went to a competition.
They chose
Gotti?
the students based off their classes and grades in science.
And who volunteered.
Yeah. We were the only ones.
There was a few other people.
There was more. They just chose those who they thought would perform best in the competition.
Okay, that's pretty funny. So I've had 2 kids that have been on Science Bowl teams, and I think somebody right after you guys won sent me a note and said, hey, did you know King Science won? Because the last time an OPS school won was when your son was on the team. So when you're talking about stress, I know you all said your parents weren't there, but I remember just my blood pressure was so high by the end of the day because you're going through these rounds, right? And everything is coming at you so fast. So I'm really impressed. Not practicing is not the worst thing in the world, because what it tells me is that you were prepared by your classes. And that is a really, really good thing. And so that's a very impressive thing, that your teachers and your staff got you ready for the competition and that you were able to go there, keep your composure even when it was really stressful. And then you had to go through, I asked them ahead of time, they had to go through a double elimination in the last round, which is really stressful when you have to go back up against that team again at the very end. So that's pretty impressive, and I just want to applaud you all for getting on that bus at 5 a.m. because some people would have said, oh, I just want to sleep in. But you all chose to do more than that, and now you get to take a trip to Washington, D.C.
Thank you.
And you'll have a wonderful time there, and you'll meet amazing students who are just like you, that love science and are engaged in their schools. So congratulations to you.
Mr. Scanlon?
Congratulations. I just had a question. We're always trying to stress STEM jobs, and science obviously being what stands for the S. Do you guys know what you want to do as a career, or what you'd like to study as you continue through your academic progression?
I'm the biology nerd of the team, and I'm interested in things like biochemistry and genetics so far, and that's kind of what I'm trying to pursue.
I'm the chemistry nerd of the group. I'm interested in both organic and non-organic chemistry.
I guess I'm the general nerd. I just basically fill in the gaps where these guys don't know anything. And I guess that's pretty representative of what I want to do, because I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, I have no idea what I want to do.
Cool.
Well, you guys might be using the word nerd. All I hear is you guys are going to make a lot of money. So keep up the great work, and just understand that, the work that you guys will eventually progress to will make a huge difference in society, and don't call yourselves nerds. Call yourself geniuses.
Nerd isn't a derogatory term.
Dr. Holman?
Congratulations, gentlemen. Would you mind sharing with us what grades you all are in? And then also, would you mind holding up your plaque so that we're able to see it?
We're all in 8th grade.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
They want to see it now. Oh, who wants to see it?
I have a question. What do you guys hope to learn with your competition in DC?
Learn from or learn before?
Learn when you go to the competition in DC?
I don't know, because every competition you learn new facts because they tell you, what's the right answer. And so it's always, interesting to learn more by going to a competition where you're supposed to know stuff to go to.
I'm interested in learning what I can learn from my peers and those around me. I always want to learn more on chemistry in any way, shape, or form.
Mr. Evans?
I just wanted to give a shout out, not only to our young men, but all of the teachers and the family that's here. Could you raise your hand if you're one of the teachers or family, relatives, friends that's here supporting these young people? We always talk about the impact of the supports, whether that's the principal, the teacher, or family, friends, and so we appreciate you, and I know you wanted to say that, so I was saying it for you, that you wanted to say thank you to all those supporters, because you wouldn't be here without their support, so congratulations to all of you, great job.
Thank you so much. If you guys, Ms. Cotting, you have another?
I just have one thing to add. I want to make sure that when you get to high school, which will be next year, since you're all 8th graders, that you join your high school Science Bowl team, because there's a high school competition as well, and it's also at Wayne State, and it was this past, I think, weekend. So I'm looking forward to seeing, I don't know where you're all going to school, but I'm looking forward to seeing some of you come back at the high school level. So stay with it. It's a great opportunity to really compete and have fun doing it and be learning at the same time. So thank you.
Thank you. You gentlemen come around and shake our hands, if you don't mind. Let me do all of them. Congratulations, thank you so much. Congratulations, great job speaking up there, awesome.
I may have a cold, we don't know yet.
What school are you going to?
We're going to be safe, fist
Awesome,
bump, fist
congratulations.
bump. Congratulations.
Central, okay. Thank you so much, congratulations.
Congratulations. I might have a cold. You're welcome. Congratulations to you. Congratulations.
Could you guys bring the banner up as well?
I don't know, I just want
One more. 1, 2.
Let the moms come up. Oh, I want a good picture. You got one? Are you sure? Go ahead. All right. Okay, Mom, stand down. Thank you.
Moving on to item G, Board and Superintendent Communications. Mr. Evans?
Thank you, Mr. President. First, just like to give a shout out to Dr. Cheryl Logan. She's in town, and I know that she's meeting individually with all school board members. I know that she's meeting with district leadership individuals and maybe even doing some house shopping, which is wonderful to hear. So I'm glad she's here in town, and just for the audience's information, she's planning on being here, I think, 3 or 4 days next month and again in April. So she's really spending time, which is a statement about her transition, that she's invested in this community already. Her conversations with me have just been outstanding, and I know she wants to know everything she can before July 1, and I think we really hit a home run with Dr. Logan. So I just wanted to mention that. I also wanted to mention, and I'll hand this around to the board table, The United States ship Omaha was recognized, and the crew was in town recently for this new naval vessel. And one of our students, Charlotte Gallup, a sixth grader at Edison Elementary, won an art contest. She drew a picture of the USS Omaha that was on the back of the program, so I thought that was kind of neat. So a shout out to Charlotte at Gallup at Edison, and also to the Central High vocal music group who sang at the event, which is kind of neat that we had two groups there participating. So I'll just pass that around. And I also wanted to mention, in case, I know I always have folks sharing with me on Twitter some thoughts and concerns and predictions about weather. We do realize there's some potential snow tomorrow, and we'll be up very early in the morning with National Weather Service and all the other programs. We'll be up probably around 4 in the morning looking at all that. I know there's some predictions out there that many of you have been sharing with me, so appreciate the Weather Service reports. So. And finally, I do want to end on something that I think is on all of our minds. I'm going to pass out a document to our board colleagues up here. This document was shared with all OPS staff, and it's regarding the tragedy in Florida. I think all of us have been moved by the events at Parkland, and I wanted to share with the board what I shared with all staff earlier this week, and talked about some of the things that we currently do in in Omaha Public Schools. And currently, the things that I think I'm most impressed with is because of the support of this board, because of the support of this community, we added safety and security features to all of our schools. We now have card reader entrance, we now have push button video entrance, and we've also rearranged many of the office settings. Not all of them yet, some of them are still under construction. But that was done in 2014, which was a great, great addition. I thank this board for the participation in that. I also want the audience to know that we have annual safety activities in all of our schools. And we've been kind of checking around on that. I'd had a couple of parents ask about it, and they didn't remember it, and then we checked with principals, and we had done those events. But I also want you to know we're pulling together our entire safety team to look at everything we do and to look at the latest research and see if there's anything more that we can do and need to do. And we're also going to be looking at all the pieces and parts of threat assessments and how we work with OPD, how we work with Sarpy County and the Sheriff's Department, because our district really covers more than just the OPD territory. So we're going to be reviewing all of that. We've got a team put together for Friday that's going to review all current practice. But I wanted the community to know that our hearts, I think all of us feel for the entire Parkland community, and we all recognize that we need to be aware of the challenges that can occur in any school in the United States. And I wanted you to feel confident that we aren't taking it lightly as a group, and we'll be working with our principals and school teams to make sure we're having all of our annual meetings and all of our monthly meetings to make sure we're prepared for any of those kind of events. So with that, Mr. President, I appreciate the time to talk.
Thank you so much, Mr. Evans. Board members, Ms. Cassidy.
Thank you, Mr. Snow. So I feel like I have to explain my outfit tonight. So mine's not really a board announcement, but yes, I told Lacey that I would not put my jacket on even though I'm cold until I tell you all why I'm wearing this shirt. So speaking of Twitter, earlier Mr. Evans was talking about Twitter, and I made a bet with Ms. Merica on Twitter that last week Bryan High School played my alma mater, South High School. It was Bryan's alumni game, and I just casually put out there on Twitter, hey, Ms. Merica, would you like to make a friendly bet? And she did. And I thought maybe we'd bet for like coffee or lunch, but her stipulation was that the loser would have to wear the other's shirt. So sadly, my Packers lost. Not by much, last 2 seconds. We shot a three-pointer, we lost. It was heartbreaking. But anyway, a bet's a bet, and I am wearing, proudly, the Bryan Bears glitter t-shirt. Yes, it is cute. So sorry, Packers, I still love you, but a bet is a bet, and here I am.
That is a very beautiful shirt.
Thank you. And I will not be betting Lacey anymore. Thank you.
Dr. Holman.
Love it. So today I had the pleasure of spending most of the day out in buildings. I started off my morning at Northwest High School, spent a good portion of the morning there, and to my surprise, the drug dog, is it Remy? Is that the dog's name? Remy was there, and I got to meet Remy and see Remy in action, and what she does walking up and down the hallways, sniffing lockers, sniffing backpacks, and got to see her in action. And so that was pretty fascinating for me, and getting to ask the officer several questions about, you know, what she would do if she were to come upon drugs. And they assured us that, like, she would just lie down in front of the locker or the backpack if she were to sniff something. And then I asked the question, well, what if a student was living in a household where maybe marijuana had been smoking, and he said that she would still kind of lay down next to it, but then at that point they would search the bag and then just talk to the student. The student obviously would not be in trouble, but it's just really interesting to see. And Mr. Lee said that just every once in a while he'll have the dog to come up and just to keep things at bay, and he says it really has helped. I don't really know if there was an issue before, but definitely. And he says that the officer was saying you can tell when some of the kids come to school and they see Remy there, they're all on their phones and they're texting each other, hey, watch, you know, Remy's here today, Remy's here today. So, you know, it was really fascinating to be there to see that. And then I followed up with visiting Masters Elementary. Excellent learning environment, all the way down to the kindergartners. They were able to tell me what their learning objectives were, why they were learning the material, why it was important for them to learn it. So that was really fun, especially in the kindergarten's classroom. And then I ended my day at Nathan Hale Middle School. Fabulous learning environment, very calm. All the students were on task, lots of learning going on. And Dr. Williams and I had a very in-depth conversation in regards to the differences between last year and this year with the transition of sixth graders, and what he and his administrative team to what they did to get changes implemented for the positive, and how well things are going this year, and how he appreciated being able to go out to a beverage magnet this year to help that staff transition with moving in the sixth graders as well. So it was an excellent day. And then I'm going to follow up just kind of with a personal shout out to my daughter, Layla Holman. She attends Fullerton Magnet, which is a communication and media magnet. And this past Saturday, Layla, she's 6 in the first grade, she presented with me as a keynote speaker in Lincoln at a conference. And we spoke for 30 minutes, and she was not afraid. She did a very excellent job, held the microphone. She, at the beginning, she was very good at wanting to make sure that she was calm beforehand. And so before we went on stage, she's like, well, Mommy, I think I need to go outside and do some deep belly breaths. And I was like, okay, well, cool. So we went out in the hallway, and she put her hands on her belly, and she did her breathing exercises. She says, I'm good to go now. We went inside, and she presented and did a very, very nice job. So just a shout out to Fullerton Magnet for also preparing our students to be able to communicate and to speak in front of audiences and find joy in doing so. So thank you.
Ms. Merica.
Well, first off, I want to thank Mrs. Cassidy for being willing to participate in our fun exchange that we had on Twitter. And I think it was really fun. I saw a lot of teachers and the team accounts and students kind of get involved and follow along. So it was kind of nice to see things snowball from a simple little Twitter exchange. So I would encourage other people to think about doing things like that between us, and just to get more, especially more of our students involved with understanding that we're not just board members that sit at a table twice a month. We're people, we're out there, and we want to be involved too. Just one little thing, I think I share this every year. If you have not walked through the TAC building recently, you really should, because we are just about to officially start the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards. The official display is February 23rd through March 31st throughout the TAC building, literally through all the hallways on the 2nd through 5th floor. And there is art displayed not just from OPS students, but from students around the state that have been submitted as excellent examples of many different forms of visual art and writing. And I am always so impressed every year walking through and seeing the talent of our OPS students and our students around the state. So if you have a chance over the next month to take about half an hour and do that. I really encourage you to.
Mr. Perlman.
Thank you. I just wanted to highlight a couple things. Last Thursday, I, along with I think a few other board members and a lot of folks from the community and staff members here, took part in our second Budget Advisory Committee meeting, and we're continuing to look at, still laying the groundwork for what needs to be done as far as targeting areas to look at to meet the budget goals that we'll have due to the challenges that we know we face. And so that was just another chance to get prepared to move forward, and I think we'll see some more movement in that area over the next month or two. Also, was able to visit the new Western Hills School, and that was great. Last weekend, they had a PTO meeting on a Sunday. I got to give credit to the teachers and the principal, Mrs. Harbison, for arranging that on a Sunday. Back in the new building, that building is amazing. The modern design, just the areas that they've carved out for pre-K, kindergarten classrooms. The pre-K isn't up and running, but I would encourage anyone who lives in that attendance area or nearby, that building looks, ready to go for pre-K. And so just want to give a shout out to the PTO there. They are coming up with some great ideas, now that they're back in the neighborhood. And so I just want to thank them for inviting me, and that's all.
Ms. Gotti.
So several things. First of all, I want to give everyone an opportunity to think about attending the Burke Theater and Music Department's presentation of Crazy for You. It's February 22nd, 23rd, and 24th at 7 p.m. So in the next few days, that's going on. Also want to give a shout out to all the students at Central who were part of the Roadshow program, which is always amazing. And would like to encourage everyone to, if you have a chance to get on YouTube, take a look at The Quadratic Killer. It is a 5-minute video that was prepared by 4 students for a competition. They had 48 hours to prepare the movie, and it is a period piece that is absolutely unbelievable. The creativity is amazing, and so I would just like to encourage everyone to, if you want to take a look at the talent of our students, Google The Quadratic Killer and watch the YouTube video of that. Also, just want to thank the PTAs in my area. I've been making my rounds, chatting with them. We're talking about the new superintendent, Dr. Logan. We're also talking about OSERS and the bond. So have had some great conversations with the folks that I've already met with, and I'll continue to make those rounds throughout the rest of the spring. Thank you.
Mr. Scanlon.
I was just looking at the report of the superintendent that they put out. A lot of congratulations, and the first person that was congratulated, I wanted to just publicly congratulate, because his daughter is in the same grade as Audrey at Crestridge, and so they play basketball together, and we get to see a lot of them, and so I get a lot of good feedback from them. Antonio Perez was selected as Educator of the Year by the Nebraska Cultural Unity Conference. If you'll remember, he's also the educator that took one of his students to Washington, D.C. to sit in Congress while they were debating the DACA, and so he definitely goes the extra mile. And when I do get to see him on the weekends when they're having basketball games, we have a lot of good conversations, and it's just great to hear the passion of the teachers and administrators and staff that we have in the buildings. They definitely go the extra mile, and that's wonderful that they get the recognition that they fully deserve.
Mr. Perlman.
Yes, thank you. One thing I forgot to mention that I wanted to about the Budget Advisory Committee is after each meeting, it's all the PowerPoints that are being used and in that meeting are being put up on Open Book. So you can find it just by Googling OPS, Open Book, Budget Advisory Committee, and it comes up. And there's some really useful PowerPoints that we see during those presentations. So if anyone wants to check those out, they're available to anyone.
Thank you. I had the opportunity to attend Nathan Hale to speak to Mrs. King's class about volunteering and community service. And shout out to Nathan Hale Middle School and Mrs. King, who I believe has been teaching the district, taught in the district for 48 years, and now just shows up to work with kids and teach them how to volunteer and get involved in the community. Also, shout out to King Science, like always. They continue to invite me in to work with students every semester, and I appreciate it. Moving on to public comment. The next item on the agenda is public comment. We have 5 speakers who have submitted request to speak forms. The board has adopted policy 8346, which provides public comment for a period of 1 hour. That same policy limits individual speakers to a maximum of 5 minutes. We ask that you respect the time limit. Mr. Ray will let you know when you have 1 minute remaining and when you have 30 seconds remaining. If you are in need of an interpreter, please let Mr. Ray know and one will be provided for you. If the subject of your public comment is related to a particular student or staff member, we ask that you not mention the student or staff member by name and instead provide that information to Mr. Ray. He will assist us in looking into those details for you. If you do not get an opportunity to speak and would like to submit any written commentary, please provide it to Mr. Ray. He will make sure each member of the board gets a copy. As a reminder, we ask that you please spell your name and state your address before you begin your public comment. And before we do that, Mr. Ray, can you raise your hand? Because sometimes people don't know who you are. So this is Mr. Ray, our board secretary. Always giving him a shout out. Do that all the time. I'm reading the script and people need to know who Mr. Ray is. It is now 7:03. The first speaker is Brad Von Gillern. And I'm sorry if I messed up your last name.
You hit it on the head.
Awesome.
My name is Brad Von Gillern, BradVonGillern, 18370 Honeysuckle Drive. I'm the CEO of Leader Construction, and I've exchanged emails with you, with the board this past week or so. I want to thank Mr. Ray for helping me in that process also and providing information there. Dr. Holman, I'm taking my deep belly breaths before I got up here. Thanks for that tip. Yeah. I'm speaking to you tonight in reference to Columbian Elementary School, which will be item J1B on your agenda as it comes up later. The recommendation of the staff and from Jacobs Engineering is to accept all of the bid alternates on that project, including alternate 1, which simply alters the size of the brick units. I sent a photo of the brick to you all yesterday and samples. We brought samples here tonight for you to look at to get a good view at those. These are not the actual colors. We're unable to get those, but they are representative of the size. When we saw that the project had a bid alternate on it, we thought that the purpose of that was to find the most economical solution for the masonry on the building, but that turned out to not be the case. It's been commented that the smaller brick more closely matches the homes in the area of the school, which is true. However, the Jewish Community Center and the Rose Blumkin home, which abut the Columbian school property, use the larger brick, which is the base bid, which is the most economical solution for the Columbian school. And they're attractive buildings, and I presume have been good neighbors to the school. My correspondence earlier in the week addressed the delta in the bids between Hausman Construction and Leader Construction if the base bid and alternate 1 were selected. That number was $87,400 difference. At that time, we didn't know which alternates were going to be selected. Now that we know that all of the alternates are going to be selected, the true delta between those numbers is $59,000. We didn't have that information until the agenda came out on Friday, so I wanted to clarify that. We support the award of the balance of the alternates, the natural lighting panels, the benches, the outdoor learning spaces, all improve the learning and teaching environments for the students and the staff. The walking track helps to integrate the school into the neighborhood and was stressed in pre-bid discussions is very important to the neighbors. The change in the brick size, on the other hand, does nothing for the students, staff, or the community. Leader Construction has built nearly dozens of projects for OPS over the years. In fact, we did the King Science Center security upgrades a number of years ago, and we have some fairly obnoxious banners outside your front door here for the 32nd and Burt Elementary School, which we're working on right now. We completed Ponca last year, which was very successful, and we've partnered with OPS over the years in their training programs awarded scholarships, and supported bond issues. In short, over a 134-year history, we've been a trusted partner of OPS and have enjoyed our working relationship. High voter confidence in the stewardship of taxpayer funds under this bond issue will certainly increase the odds of the new bond passing this next May. As a reminder, this project involves the construction of a new school building and then a tear down of the existing building. Oftentimes, there are unexpected things that happen during the course of a project, and it would be desirable in wisdom to be able to bank the delta of $59,000 towards any potential scope changes. Lastly, with the security of students so appropriately on all of our minds right now, I believe that allocating these funds towards improvements that will make schools safer for students, faculty, and staff would be a far better use of the funds. In closing, I encourage the board to reject the current recommendation and instead award all but alternate one, resulting in a savings to the district and the taxpayers of $59,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Faith Johnson and Ava Robinson.
Good evening, President Snow, Mr. Evans, and board members. I'm Faith Johnson. I am a social studies and math teacher at Nathan Hale Magnet Middle School, and I really love it there. Tonight I came to kind of speak to you for a minute about one of the things that we're doing at our school to celebrate Black History Month. And one of the things that I helped to do was bring African Culture Connection, a company that was started by Dr. Charles Avosi, who unfortunately couldn't make it this evening, to talk about the program. But this will be my third bout with it, having been at another school that participated with it. And as my school is so and the staff is so into student engagement, I thought this was a really awesome program to bring in for our sixth graders. Unfortunately, we can't do it with all sixth graders, so we have a group of about 40 students who are participating, where they learn about 5 different kingdoms through this program over a series of about 20 sessions, and they learn dance, they learn how to play drums, authentic African djembe drums. They learn about from beginning to end how the drums are made and what the meaning of everything is, what the rhythm means. We're still in the beginning stages of it. However, I think the kids are starting to like it. They do know that at the end there will be a great big presentation for the entire school and their parents, and I would love to invite you as well. One of my students, Ava Robinson, is here, and she'd probably like to tell you about her experience thus far.
So, right now I think the program is great. I think the program is great. It really, we get to learn drums and stuff, and we're going to learn dancing soon. And I'm a bad dancer, so that's good. I think it's a really fun program that I think people like to do in our classrooms. And so far, it's great.
I'm good, okay. I don't know if any of you have any questions about the program. Like I said, they're just in the beginning stages. Unfortunately, they don't know too much about it, what's to come, and I don't want to spoil it for all of them. But like I said, the next time that Dr. Avosi and his crew come through our school, they will be creating some jewelry and talking about art in Africa. And so in celebration of Black History Month, and also in 6th grade social studies, it's just a bit ahead of our time. We are kind of taking it back to the motherland, and they're getting to experience hands-on what a lot of the things from Africa mean and stand for. So.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. If you can get us, Mr. Ray, all the information of the performance.
Perfect.
He'll get that to the board, and I would love to at least attend. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Up next is Nadia and Spolak and Sean Harris. And again, I apologize if I did not.
Good evening. My name is Nadia, 5401 North 48th Street, and we are just here to speak on what we are doing for Black History Month at Omaha North. So first, we are a part of the Black Student Leadership Council. This is our second year having the program. It's just African American students within the school just coming together and meeting, seeing on improvements in the school and our just what we can do in the school to promote Black History Month. And this month is really our target month for like things we're doing inside of the school. So we first started off with spirit days throughout the school that teachers and staff could have participated in. Thanks, be on that.
I'm Deshaun Harris. You can just come up a little bit. I'm Deshaun Harris, and I'm a senior. I wasn't a part of it last year, but this is my first year joining it because our sponsor, Mr. Jackson, just came here last year, and I didn't really know about it, but sorry, I have to duck a little bit. But now that I know about it, I think it's a really great program. And to finish what she was talking about with the Spirit Days, last year they had every Friday, the last Friday of the month, they did a all black day for all the students and teachers to join in on. And this year we took it a step further. We did for this Friday, for each Friday of the February, except for one because we had parent teacher conference, we did Black Friday, 70s discos, classic hip hop, and African garment.
And just to add on what we're doing inside of the school, the African Garment Day is the 28th. And also on that day, we are doing a peach cobbler and ice cream trivia for the teachers, and they could come and answer questions. And if they answer the right amount of questions, they can get peach cobbler and ice cream for free. If not, they have to pay up. So, yeah. And we are also doing our African American History Challenge. We had a few students participate in that. And we are also, one of our main things this month is our Black History Month Expo and Bake Sale. And we did our first one today. We're doing 3 in total. We are doing one. We did one today during A7. Tomorrow we're doing it during B8, and also tomorrow at 6 p.m. Well, 5. The 5 starts at the bake sale and expos, and the vendors are coming out and selling things to the community. And we're doing a bake sale from 5 to 6, and then the program is from 6 to 8. And during the day is shorter, modified version, so they're only missing one block of the day. And it's just a real nice way to show everything we've been doing inside of the school. Last year was our first year doing it, and we only got it approved to do it after school. So from last year to this year, seeing it be able to be after school and during school so that the students could see it too if they can't make it to the after school one, it's just really seeing how far we've come as a program. We're also doing African American Professionals Day. This is where we're aiming for 100 professionals to come into our school and set up tables and speak to the students about how they got to the point they're at, because we don't see a lot of African American professionals typically. Just to come and talk to the students and see what they're doing and just see how they got to the point, and just come and talk to them, seeing how different like businesses could be, and seeing that we're not all pro athletes or like hairdressers and stuff like that. It's just like a whole variety of professionals coming to talk to our students. And our program consists of 60 students, but the things we're doing contribute to the whole school. So we're reaching everybody, we're informing everybody of our program, and even after today, a lot of students were like, okay, I want to join this. How do I join this? Because it's getting the word out there. People hear it and they think they're going to have to do work. But, it's really fun, and we just go out and do everything with our school and not just within BSLC. Everything we do is for the betterment of the school. Oh. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Spurlock and Mr. Harris. If you guys have any documents, you can pass it to Mr. Ray for the board, and your teacher sponsor will probably send us some more information about your organization. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Watch out for the bricks there. Our next speaker is John Jackson. Thank you. And by the way, while Mr. Jackson is coming up here, Mr. Evans did say on the 28th Friday he will wear 70s disco and show up at North High. Come on. He used to have an afro, believe it or not.
things change over time.
Yes, this is also open to the public, and we'll put it up for everybody else. Sorry, Mr. Johnson.
No problem. Jackson.
Jackson,
sorry.
I apologize.
Okay. My name is John Jackson, 9636 Grand Avenue. I'm an English teacher at North High School, as well as a sponsor for the Black Student Leadership Council and the coach for the African American History Challenge. I just wanted to speak to that a little bit and also be able to address any questions that you all might have for the students because they use. So we went right up to that 5-minute mark. If there were any questions that you might have lingering about what they're doing, the purpose and function, and what the overall objectives might be. One of the things that they're doing as well, we're preparing our teachers as well. One thing they taught me in college was don't test what you don't teach. And so that said, the teachers are receiving daily announcements. Now the teachers expect the students to listen to the announcements. So the announcements to cover the trivia that they will need for that peach cobbler ice cream trivia at the end of the month is embedded with the history and the trivia. And we have a student who competed in the African American History Challenge sponsored by 100 Black Men of Omaha. She reads those daily for them over the loudspeaker. So we have to find out if the teachers are listening as well. What they covered was a great opportunity just to kind of speak a little bit about their objectives and see what the students are doing. I'm very proud of them. I really don't have anything else to add. They covered everything, but I just put myself on the agenda just so I can say hi up close, and you can say hi to me too. And then you have an opportunity to answer questions that you might have about what they presented. Do you have anything at all?
Thank you so much, Mr. Jackson, for coming up and speaking with us. If you can get information to Mr. Ray about when you guys have your meetings, I'm sure everybody on the board would like to attend or attend one of your meetings.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. We typically don't do question and answer during public comment.
Nope, that was fine at all.
I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much again, Mr. Jackson. Our next speaker, and I believe that is the social studies supervisor back there applauding all the time, so thank you. Our next speaker is Matt Schent. All righty.
Good evening. My name is Matt Schent, SCHENDT, address 11627 Virginia Plaza. I'm Vice President of Hausman Construction, and thank you for just a few brief moments here. We've been fortunate enough to partner with Omaha Public Schools and Jacobs Engineering on, first of all, Benson High School. We're finishing the final phase of Benson this summer and excited to turn that finished project over. Just recently mobilized to Bryan High School and Bryan Middle School. So our teams are mobilizing there and excited to be on campus and do some great work for those facilities over the next year and a half. And finally, excited to have the opportunity to work on Columbian Elementary School. Understand you're faced with a difficult decision, as the team from Leader explained, and we'll just respect whatever decision is made. In our industry, we have to put out a lot of bids, and we've been on both sides of the fence. So whatever decision is made by the board and the facilities team, we'll certainly respect that. And again, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Moving on to the consent agenda. I will now entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda before us. Don't all speak at once.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Godding, second by Dr. Holman. Any abstentions? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Perlman.
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
Scanlon.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Snow.
Aye.
Cassidy.
Aye.
Godding.
Aye.
Hallman.
Aye.
America.
Aye.
9.
Motion carries. Our next item on our agenda, scroll through this, is J1A. Mace setting up the information. And actually, we'll have Mr. Evans start off when you're ready.
We actually have bond counsel here tonight as well to kind of talk about what is and what isn't included in the resolution and some of the flexibility that's provided to the school board and the district within the verbiage of the language that our bond counsel gave us. So I'm going to turn it over to Baird Holm and ask them to come up and share a little bit on the verbiage of the resolution. And I do want to thank the board. I've had multiple conversations this week with board members about the resolution and some other details that were a part of last board meeting's acceptance of Phase 2 bond. Thank you.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. My name is Tyler Mullen, M-U-L-L-E-N, with Baird Holm Law Firm, 1700 Farnham Street. I'm here on behalf of our firm for bond counsel for the district. What this resolution will do is it will authorize the placement of the district's request to issue up to $409,900,000 in bonds on the ballot for the May primaries. And this is not locking the district into anything. We're just putting the question on the ballot, requesting the approval of the voters of the public. And what we've done with the election question is we've authorized the use of the proceeds of the bonds to put together to build 5 different schools and various other capital projects in pursuant to the district's capital improvements plan. And I'm more than happy to answer any questions that anyone may have.
Thank you. Mr. Perlman.
Sorry, I probably should have asked this earlier, because this is just kind of a language thing. If you look at section 1, line 5, do you think it would have any impact if there was a comma after the word buildings?
Can you repeat that again, Mr. Perlman? Sorry.
Well, I guess first part of the question is, do you think it would have any impact if there was a comma after the word buildings? And if so, do you think there should be a comma after the word buildings?
I don't know if it would have an effect or not, but I'm more than happy to make that change.
Ms. Ryan.
I think what that is, the Oxford comma, and that now it's more accepted. We're not doing Oxford commas anymore, so that's grammatically correct. So I don't know if that has other impact.
It's not an Oxford comma.
Ms. Merica?
I think I understand what Mr. Perlman is asking, because there have been legal cases that have been decided on whether or not it is an Oxford comma. When you have a list of 3 things and whether or not you have a comma between the second and third item. And so if I understand you correctly, I think that's what you're asking, to just verify that not having a comma there doesn't drastically impact our ability to do something based on the outcome of the bond election.
Correct. I think we all agree that the phrase school buildings is intended to stand alone. And so I think by adding a comma, it makes it clear that we are talking about school buildings rather than school buildings and school building improvements. I don't know if that would take a motion.
Just so you know, that section 1 will not appear on the ballot. It's only the language in section 2. But there is a bit of timeliness related to this. The executed resolution has to be to the election commissioner by March 1st. So.
Right. Well, I think if we all, and I don't know how this works, but I don't think there's any question as to what the intent is. Correct. I mean, the intent is school buildings, and so I don't want to make an issue out of something that is not an issue. And if it's not on the ballot, I don't think it is an issue at all. So having that clarification, I'm satisfied with that.
Thank you, Mr. Perlman. Mr. Scanlon?
Were you a part of drafting the last resolution for the 2014?
Yes.
Okay. Just some of the I guess, feedback I got. I know that it's drafted to give the district the most, I guess, flexibility. The last one had some language on it that I think led some voters to believe that we were going to have the design of the two high schools and elementary schools and perhaps the middle schools included in the last bond, which then I had some folks that had voted for it, and then when they found out that those designs were not included, is there anything in this wording that would perhaps lead to misunderstanding by the voters? To where the last one, I mean, if you go back and you read the resolution, which a lot of voters, they read at the polling place, they don't necessarily follow along all the different board meetings that we have, to where, certain things were left in or left out. Is this one a little bit more clear as to there shouldn't be misunderstanding that, projects would be included that in this second phase that that will not be?
Again, I believe so. My understanding is that the chunk of the proceeds, the biggest chunk is going to go to the construction of the 5 schools. There's going to be additional, HVAC and other capital improvements that'll go along with existing school buildings, and I think all those are encompassed within the question.
Ms. Gotti?
I know when I read through it, it seemed very broad and very general, so that it wasn't too specific, and I think that's helpful, because that's when it gets too specific is when it gets challenging. I did have one question at the bottom of page 1. The oval for marking is, on my copy anyway, not beside the yes, and it'll get corrected.
It won't be like,
and
it won't be like that on the ballot. That's
right.
just a function of Microsoft Word.
Okay.
On the resolution.
Okay, just wanted to make sure on
Yep.
that. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gotti. Mr. Evans, I think you had.
I just wanted to apologize really to Mr. Scanlon. I do think we spent more time really looking at this. We met as a group multiple times, really fine-tooth combing, because I heard some of those same comments and concerns. So I think we should have been a little more clear on some of that language. So I think this one, we really looked in-depthly at it as a group and looked several times and brought it back several times. So I think we're able to meet every expectation on this resolution without some of those conflicts.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Any other discussion? I will now entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
1 sec.
Point of order. Do we need to actually say what the
We have
motion
to
is?
read it.
I was
That's
getting
what I
ready
was
to
trying
make
to
the
get to it,
motion,
sorry.
but
Mr. Perlman, would you like to read the recommended motion?
Yes, I move. Here, my microphone's on. I move to submit to the qualified electors of the district a proposition relating to the issuance of $409,900,000 of bonds by the district as attached.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Perlman and second by Mr. Smith. Any discussion? Mr. Perlman?
Just briefly, as it relates to one part of the bond that's been talked about kind of ad nauseum at this point, but it's the pools to be attached in a West Omaha high school. I know we are still working towards a collaboration, and I'm confident that it's going to be in everyone's best interest. Had an opportunity to speak with the parties today, and again, there's still a lot of details to be worked out, but that's really not an issue really for right now. Right now is moving forward with the proposition in general, and I look forward to getting the specific details in the weeks ahead, and Like I said, all parties are on the same page in doing what's best for the students of all the schools in our district, along with the citizens at large and the taxpayers. So I'm confident that we will all come to an agreement that's a win-win-win for everyone. And so I just want to point that out because we're still in the early stages. But like I said, I don't know that anyone would expect all details to be finalized at this point. So I'm looking forward to I'm hearing more on that in the weeks ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Perlman. Roll call, please.
Ryan.
Aye.
Scanlon.
Aye.
Smith. Aye. Snow.
Aye.
Cassidy.
Aye.
Goding.
Aye.
Holman.
Aye.
America.
Aye.
Perlman.
Aye.
9-9.
Motion carries. This is the second part of our promise that we promised the public in 2014, and today I'm thrilled to be on this board with you guys to continue that promise on fire and life safety, and building capacity in Northwest Omaha, South Omaha, and all through our district. So thank you guys so much for taking the step on putting this on the ballot for May 15. Moving on to J1B. This is Columbian School, Mr. Evans.
Yeah, Mr. President, thank you. While we've got some staff moving to the podium, I'm going to mention a note. The principal from Columbian wasn't able to be here today, but I did ask her to prepare some feedback to the board. And just as a reminder to the public and the board, there's a process called EdSpecs that includes the principal, district staff, community leaders, and they walk through all parts and pieces of the projects, whether it's Western Hills that Mr. Perlman talked about earlier, or in this case, Columbian. And so you've got in front of you a letter from Nanette Beller, the principal at Columbian Elementary, where she walks through some of those supporting comments of why the EdSpecs committee encouraged us to adopt alternates 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and walks through what each one of those mean. And at the bottom of the page, she mentions that she wanted to emphasize the importance of the EdSpecs process provided by Schimmer Architects and supported by Jacobs OPS. The process included parents, students, teachers, community members, alumni, as well as the principal. Alternates all are on the lines above, and EdSpecs strongly wanted it to be shared with the board that a lot of input was gathered on this, and trying to create aesthetics that pleases all the community, I think, was part of that EdSpecs process. So I wasn't in those meetings, but I know they had drawings and potential drawings for what the building might look like. And I know she also mentioned, I think we had an earlier speaker who mentioned something about a couple of other facilities that were by Columbian, although actually I think they don't point towards the neighborhood. I think they point towards 132nd. Is that right? And I think the elementary school is actually tucked in that neighborhood. So those are the statements from the principal, who was a big part of that EdSpecs committee. I know we have Mr. Summers here as well to answer any questions the board might have, but that's kind of the process we've used historically to allow input on the project and movement forward. I understand after the fact, looking at something, it might look a little different, but there was a process, and it is a process that's been used for multiple projects.
Mr. Summers, could you talk about the EdSpec process real quick?
Sure.
In general, of what is the EdSpec process?
The EdSpec process is actually a process the district had long before Jacobs or the bond program. They've used it for probably as long as Mr. Warnicki's been here, so 80 years. No, but it's a process that the district really utilizes to engage community, businesses that might be in the neighborhood, parents, staff, to really make sure the vision of the project, maybe it is exterior conditions that are concerned from the community, where staff's more concerned about what are the adjacency of the spaces. But it's a good opportunity for those cross-sectional groups to come together and kind of blend the vision of the building. So on all the new facilities, that's a big piece to the overall design process.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion for Oh, go ahead. Mr. Broman.
Okay, just a couple quick questions, and honestly, I feel like I'm in a debate with myself here because I see both sides of it. Not the first time that's happened. On this piece of paper we were handed, I want to answer the question. It says, why wouldn't we create the best possible aesthetic for current and future Columbian students? It's because we have a fiduciary duty to spend the money as wisely as we can. But that being said, when we look at the alternate number one, the face brick, the thing that just absolutely jumps off the page for me is Hausman's estimate of $5,400. When the other five come in between $88,200 and $131,000. So I don't think any of, well, I can't speak for anyone else, but it would hard for me to believe that anyone, we're all on the same page. We want to spend the money as wisely as we can. But I just don't see that we are actually paying more for alternate number one due to the fact that Hausman is estimating it at $5,400. So I guess my question is, am I missing something in that equation? And the second part of my question is, what are the odds of us, should we approve to move forward with the low bid as it is, what's the chances or likelihood that that estimate of $5,400 would remain? Because for me, that's the operative question.
So let me answer the second part first. So the contract that the district executes with the selected contractor is a lump sum value. So regardless of the individual alternate price, what you're contracting the contractor for is to deliver everything that's inside the plans and specifications for the lump sum value of $14.2 million, depending on which alternates or which contractor the board elects to award to. So typically alternates are used to provide an opportunity at bid day to determine, can we afford this, or are we getting a really good price on it? Because at the time of estimate, maybe from the architects or from our group, it wasn't something that could potentially be afforded, but on bid day we got a really good price because the marketplace is just offering that. What we stay away from is trying to analyze each individual line and why a contractor would do something different than another. They all run their own business different ways. Something could be in the base bid that's not in the alternate, and something more in the alternate not in the base. There's 100 ways to do this process. So again, what the district's commitment or piece of the contract is that lump sum total. It's not broken down into the line by line. The alternates are used to establish that total lump sum. Does that help with that second piece?
Well, absolutely, not really, because I just need to know, if the alternate can be done for $5,400, for me, all my questions are answered. But if there's a substantial probability that that number will be closer to the 5 other estimates, then I'll need to think about it more.
That's not something I can answer, sir.
Mrs. Gotti.
So I looked at it differently, because I did look too and said, wow, only $5,000 for that bid. The way I looked at it was without that particular item, so if you go all the way across to the total, the $14,260 subtract $5,000, that gives you $14,255. The second bid would be $14,291 minus $95,000. So if you looked at it that way, the removal of that item would result in over $50,000 less on the total project than with the item in there. Does that make sense when you look at the totals?
Yes, but again, if the work can be done for $5,400 at a 95% savings over the 5 other bids, then that's amazing. And
Mrs. Merica.
So I think from sitting on a few, not ed spec committees, but the committees that are reviewing bids, and I can't remember what construction manager at risk committee. I think to try to explain what Mr. Summer was saying is, so say if the winning firm says, yes, we can do this alternate for this price, and we award them a contract of $14.26 million, that's what they're awarded. If it actually cost them $100,000 to do it, we don't allot them extra funds for that. It comes out of the amount that they were awarded in a lump sum, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Does that answer? Okay.
Right?
And that's why I came up to help explain also, it's a fixed lump sum price bid. So whatever prices that we're choosing across those columns are fixed prices, they can't change. So once we agree to those. So as Ms. Merica said, if you go across the full line, that is a guaranteed price that the contractor will do that project for.
Mr. Scanlon, sorry about that.
I was just going to reiterate that in the construction industry, different companies put different values on the individual items, but the whole package is your contract amount. It doesn't matter if I estimate that it costs us, $5,400 to do the brick and it costs $100,000, still our contract doesn't change. And so companies will play around with different numbers and try to itemize things differently, but it's just the base bid that matters.
Mr. Perlman.
So just for clarity, I think I'm understanding it now. The only way that Leader, the only way that that bid would come under Hausman would be if we eliminated alternate one. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay. And my only other question is, if it can be estimated, the difference in maintenance costs over 10, 20, 30 years by using different bricks. For example, if you have more bricks, is there more mortar and more maintenance? Is it those sorts of things?
I guess if you look at the overall project and the amount of mortar and the joints and the size of brick, we're building a building for 75 years or more. We don't really have a lot of maintenance on a masonry building before that time. You'll have some probably waterproofing and some minor repairs over 20, 30-year lifespan. But you're not going to be replacing all the mortar. You're not going to be retucking the brick before, quite a few years, 50 years or so.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I will now entertain a motion for item J1B.
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Perlman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Holman. Any discussion? Ms. Gotti?
So I read through all the information, and you guys know me, I really study the topic. So I actually went over, I drove around the Jewish Community Center all the way to the back side, which actually does butt up to the playground, which I didn't realize. I took a look at the brick there, which, because of the scale of the building, you don't really notice the difference on that brick. I then drove through the neighborhood, looked at all the houses and the brick that was on the homes. They're not 100% brick fronts, nor are all of the homes the same color of brick either, for that matter. Lots of difference, lots of variation in the area. And I thought about the ed spec process, and typically when you go through that, you don't necessarily know what costs are for all the things that you would like. And while I respect the ed spec process significantly, how it works and the value of that, and appreciate everyone who puts their time in, I'm going to vote no on this item just because I feel like I just could not get a sense that the change in the brick was really that significant between what I saw at the Jewish Community Center, where the Columbian School will sit, and it really backs up to West Fair Acres predominantly, and none of those homes actually have any brick on the back side of it. I would be more concerned about the color if somebody was asking me, because color is really important to me and the aesthetic part of that. But the size just didn't really strike me, and so I'm going to vote no on this simply because I would vote for all of it except for alternate number 1, but I just feel like for that $50,000, I don't see the value in increasing this, or decreasing the size of the brick. So I just want to be clear so everybody understands. I certainly respect the Columbian Ed Spec process and respect the request, but I think a lot of times those requests come in before people actually know clearly what the bids are and what the costs are of sometimes the things we want versus the things we need.
Thank you. Mr. Scanlon?
Just to let everybody know that, we're a structural steel company, and we bid out, or we send out bids to a lot of these construction companies. The construction manager at risk, I excused myself from being on that committee because of potential conflicts of interest or perceived conflicts of interest. As in this case, when disputes come up, I'll be abstaining just because I don't want anybody to try to view it as a conflict or anything like that, so I will be abstaining.
Thank you. Ms. Merica?
Okay, I do have a question, just because I don't have the 14 bond gigantic book in front of me. With all the alternates that were added on, are we still within the amount that was allocated for Columbian's overall project, and do we still have room for contingency funds if something does happen during the
Correct.
construction process?
Yes.
So I guess that's where my main struggle with this lies, is we can't use those funds for something else. They are bond funds, they are designated for construction of buildings. We can't take those funds and had someone say you could hire an extra staff member. We can't. They're one-time construction funds that have to be used on constructions and renovations for buildings. And I do have a hard time going against the Ed Spec committee because I do also understand and respect that process. But it makes me think we're a policy-making body, and we're talking about brick sizes. And it just makes me think, okay, what else is going to come? If an Ed Spec committee wants to use a different type of paint in a building, and we have disagreement about paint types, is that going to come up and be a topic at a board meeting? And so that's why, since it is within the allocation, it works out, there's still room within the allocation for contingency. I know I've had a lot of other schools use some of their contingency funds to add things or change things slightly so that their school fits their vision of what they want their school to look like in their neighborhood. That's why I will be supporting this.
Mr. Perlman?
Just briefly, I agree with Ms. Merica. It's not our job to micromanage and choose what bricks are used in the buildings, but that being said, it is our duty to make sure that we are spending every penny wisely. So I would urge continued fiscal, I don't know, whatever word you want to use. We need to watch every penny we're spending, whether that's car bonuses or training to teach us how to talk to the media and post things on Twitter. We need to watch every penny that we're spending when we're asking taxpayers to support a $409 million bond, asking lawmakers to support a pension bond, and where we are, we're in the middle of a budget advisory committee, and 85% of our budget goes to staff. We need to rethink our priorities and spending, and every penny that we spend is not every penny. None of it belongs to us. It belongs to the taxpayers.
Thank you, Mr. Perlman. Mr. Evans?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a couple of comments. If we begin to take alternates out of proposals, my recommendation to the board is that we rebid everything, because it really changes the bidding for all the participants, because we don't know what these bids would have been without alternate one in it. And so my only recommendation is, we can't just take pieces and parts out and then it change who wins the bid and who loses the bid, because that then becomes, we'll do it every board meeting. We'll have someone say, well, if you take that out, then that would have been successful for me. So my only suggestion is, if the board chooses to do this, then my suggestion would be that we quickly go back and rebid. And I recognize that's a challenge, and I see staff taking a breath there. But to me, we've changed the process that we gave to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bidders when we pull one out after they've already turned in a bid. They've already totaled up that total price and said, I can do all of this for X. And I was the low bidder to do all of that. And now we said, well, don't do that. And now someone else becomes the low bidder. I think that creates an unfair environment for all of our bidders, and I think it creates a lot of chaos in the future that won't end on this one. It will go on to the next one. So that'd be my only suggestion. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you so much, Mr. Evans. Roll call, please.
Scanlon.
Abstain.
Smith.
Aye.
Snow.
Aye.
Cassidy.
Aye.
Goding.
No.
Holman.
Aye.
America.
Aye.
Perlman.
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
7 aye. 1 no and 1 abstention.
Motion carries. Up next is J1C, update on OSERS and other legislative issues. Welcome.
Good evening. Where we are, I want to first tell you where we are in this session, because our universe of what we're looking at for issues is pretty well set. The priority designation, the date by which priorities must be designated was yesterday for committee priority bills and senator priority bills. Today was for speaker priority bills. So bills that are not on that list of priorities probably aren't going to get heard this year, so it really narrows down what we have to talk about. The OSERS bill 548 is a committee priority bill, so assuming it gets the votes out of committee, it will get time on the floor for debate. There is also a bill that is the education kind of cleanup bill that for K-12 that will be on the floor. We'll have to watch that for amendments that can be filed to that bill, pretty much anything dealing with education. There are also a number of bills that would affect TIOSA because of ag land valuation issues or property tax considerations. There are several proposals, probably a half dozen. The Revenue Committee is likely going to put out or advance to the floor one proposal that they'll have to come with some kind of a compromise inside the committee. So I think most part, those bills are not where the discussion it'll be on one bill that the committee, Revenue Committee, decides they want to address all of those issues. So it appears the most significant issue and probably the only major issue that we're confronting right now is LB 548, the OSERS bill. Where that stands right now, it's in committee. There have been discussions that trying to find a number that would work, and the The committee has been brought a little bit more up to date, but primarily it's being marshaled by Senators Coulterman and Senator Lindstrom, who are both trying to, I believe, trying to find a way to help OPS address the pension funding issue. We will know more about that over the next couple of days. There will be some actuarial numbers provided in the next couple of days, I think, that will give you a more solid number to deal with. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Ms. America?
And we do continue to have our legislative committee meetings every Friday as session continues. There was a hearing last Wednesday in the legislature where they discussed the various amendments that have been introduced to LB 548. And Mr. Snow and Mrs. Goding did testify on behalf of the board, along with a few others from the district. And so if either of you have anything you want to share from that, I think that would be a good time now.
I'd be happy to talk about it a little bit. I think that the one thing that we all walked away from was the recognition that it's a very complex issue. And I think those hearing the issue recognized it's more complex than just a few little pieces here or there, and it's not that easy to understand. It's a lot of story problems almost in trying to get to an answer. And so I think that was one of the big takeaways. I think that the other thing that we heard was definitely an interest and a desire to try to help us, because they recognize that there's challenges and that we're faced with lots of challenges. And so I would say that was a very receptive audience from the Legislative Committee, the Retirement Committee. I think that Martha Stoddard, I know, wrote an article after the hearing. I think if you're looking for something that summarized well, she did a good job of getting the facts and getting them accurate in that particular article, or as close as can be to something that's pretty complex. We talked a lot about the challenges we face in trying to work through some stable funding and the recognition that we will need to have cuts. We talked about not specifically what those cuts are, but the recognition that in looking at the ARC payments that are coming down the road, it would be best if we could provide to our CFO a stable number or some component that would allow us to work toward a goal. I think that was a key factor there. A lot of questions asked about things like debt load, where we're at in the budgeting process, what we're doing to address the issues. A lot of questions more from a technical standpoint related to pension bonds. Connie and I were in Lincoln on Monday and had the opportunity to visit with the Nebraska investment officer, and he did some research with what Kansas has done. Colorado has also, when the Denver system, the Denver school retirement system, was turned over to the state of Colorado because of some of the investment decisions they had made. One of the things, it was a two-part. One part was for pension obligation bonds, and the other were for additional contributions by the district. So he had done some of that research. I think everybody's trying to get to the place where we can come up with a number, and that's a number we can all live with, and that we can work toward goals. So my take would be that it was a good session. It was positive in that there were difficult questions asked, but it's a complex issue.
Thank you, Ms. Gotti. Mr. Perlman?
I have a question, because I'm not, this is kind of out of my wheelhouse, but what are the odds, if any, that the district could be on the losing side of the equation in this proposal?
I hesitate to put odds, but it's certainly a possibility that LB 548 does not pass. We still, I mean, there's a lot of factors. First, it's moving, getting the votes out of committee, getting the votes on the floor, but also importantly, this session, and that's why I try to give you a background of the session, is that the floor can get pretty jammed up, and if we have to move ahead of stuff.
Actually, I meant, should it pass?
Oh, that I think until we have a number that the actuaries come up with, that the board is comfortable with, I think from there, I think then you have to run the math to determine if the savings are there. In the last number that was talked about at the hearing, I believe the actuarial report showed and I'm very cautious using it, I'm just picking numbers from that report. I think you have to add some other things back in, but it showed a savings about 188 million, 190 million over the course of time. Now, it does not include the interest expense on those on the bonds themselves. That's what the difference in the actuarial liability would be. So it's hard to put a number on until we have until there's a solid number that, from a budgeting standpoint, that the board thinks that the district can handle. And from there, I think that is a step that the board has to consider, is what are the savings when it's all said and done.
Right, a couple of related questions. Is that using the 6.6% assumption or 7.5? The actuaries I use, and I may defer to Mrs. Gotti at some point here, but the actuaries use 7.5%. The capital returns that the state investment officer is now projecting is 6.8, 6.9. It's up, I think, just a bit from last year that was closer to that 6.6. But the actuary is using 7.5% because that is the assumed rate of return that OSERS has.
So I can just add a little bit to that. Because 7.5% is what the PERT board and the OSERS board have given the actuary as the assumed rate of return, that's what's used. Aon does a report for the Nebraska Investment Council, and in that particular report, they're showing an annualized return. And remember, 30 years is a very, very long time, and we can never imagine what could happen in the 30 years, but they're using a 6.6 annualized return on their forecast, and that's the Aon to the Nebraska Investment Council, which is not what has been adopted by either board. And the other thing to remember, I think, is that the Nebraska Investment Council has historically outpaced the Aon 30-year number, and so I think that's something to also be aware of when you look at their historical returns. As long as your delta, your arbitrage between that 7.5% and what you issue bonds for is acceptable, and that's part of getting to the number and getting to the rate, and part of the reason why we've wanted to move forward on this, not knowing how many interest rate hikes will happen during this year and all those kinds of things. So trying to get that nailed down, and I think we're still working on the number.
Mr. Evans?
And I think Luann answered, Ms. Gotting answered it, but I think that's what Ben was looking for, is what's the difference between what you're going to pay on interest on that bond versus what the return's going to be on that bond. And I don't think that any of us can give an exact number, but you gave the Aon numbers for NIC, Nebraska Investment Council, and when you look at the long term, it looks like you're going to be ahead. It's going to save taxpayer money over time, but I don't think we can give a precise number because we don't know the interest rate the bond will be sold at, nor do we know the 30-year, what it's going to look like 30 years over time. We know the history's pretty good. We know that the recent history looks real good, but we also know that's a fluctuating number as well. So it's a kind of a tough to give you a precise number, but all the actuarial charts would say it should save at least approximately $100 million, and could do better depending on what investment returns are above and beyond what the interest rate is on that obligation bond. Is that kind of what we were talking about, is trying to
Yes.
predict that
Right.
differentiation?
Right, just trying to be as conservative as possible and go from there, basically. And I do have one other question.
One second, Mr. Scanlon. You go ahead.
I'm curious what, if any, potential impact, and then from potential to probability of an impact on the bond rating, and what financial impact that could have.
That has been discussed, but I have not been a first party to that conversation. I think Mrs. Godding has.
So I think the thing to remember on this is that the debt already exists on our books. So it's a swapping of debt. There's no change there. So the debt already exists, and if we can bring that debt to a lower place, the challenge is, depending on what the number is you bring in, there may or may not be an ARC payment, and there may be an increase in unfunded liability, not requiring an ARC payment, that would still flow through the books if it sat on the books of OPS. And that's where some of this complexity lies. So today, it's a swapping of debt. Doesn't necessarily mean that 2 or 3 years from now, that unfunded liability hasn't gone up but no ARC required, or hasn't gone down and no ARC required. And that's part of the challenge of working through these numbers and trying to come up with what the right number is.
Thanks. Mr. Scanlon?
Just listening to all the conversation that we've had tonight, there's a lot of maybes, could, might. That's why I don't support this amendment to go out for bonds until we have the Nebraska Investment Council come and talk to us and give us an investing point of view. Does it make sense to go out and go for bonds and make a large contribution? Because if you just this past couple of weeks, I mean, there's been huge fluctuations in the market. You bet wrong, and all of a sudden, we try to get it funded 100%, and we do it on, Monday. Tuesday, the market falls 300 points, 1,000 points. We're right back kind of where we are. We didn't do anything. Now, you could sit there and argue the opposite. Well, okay, what if we did it on Wednesday when the market was way down and then the market went way up the next time? Okay, we've closed that gap. But the problem is with an individual retirement account, you're not going to touch that money until you get to retirement age. With a pension, you've got to meet obligations of people that are drawing off that, so that I just want to hear from the Nebraska Investment Council, the people that get paid and are the experts in the investments and managing the pension. Is it a better idea to have those funds 100%, and what's there to help minimize the risk that one-time lump sum payment doesn't bite us by having a market swing in the wrong direction? Those are questions that I know Mr. Lindsay, he's a lobbyist, he's not investment, and we're asking questions about, what would this do? And I think we haven't had the right person, the Nebraska Investments Council, come and speak to us so we can make the best decision whether this would make sense to support a possible, bond issue that would go for the OSER's unfunded liability. And also, another part that it kind of leaves me out there, that it says, because OPS would not be asking taxpayers to pay more, the bonds would not be subjected to a vote. Yeah, okay, but it's still money that we're asking for. What if people have a strong feeling, or constituents have a strong feeling that, you know, OPS got themselves into this pension problem? They should figure out a way to get out of it without borrowing money. So I don't support this amendment until I get more information.
Ms. Merica?
So to give you a little bit of information for Mr. Scanlon, for everyone, the information about the bonds was shared with Michael Walden Newman at the Investment Council. And I don't, Mr. Lindsay, if you can, because I don't have it in front of me, of who all testified at the amendment hearings.
The, well, who all testified would, try to remember, Mrs. Gotting, Mr. Stowe, Mr. Kramer, Jason Hayes from the NSEA,
The Emperor's executive director.
Osers testified in a neutral capacity. Michael Walden Newman, the state investment officer, was asked by the chairman to come, not really testify, but be available for questions. And the committee had the opportunity to ask him questions. He also, and it might be helpful to the board, he sent an email to retirement committee members that talked about how this worked in Kansas, and that Kansas had a net benefit from doing that. And that might be helpful. I will try to get a hold of that email and get it forwarded to all of you. I think it would provide you with insight as far as the investment, Mr. Walden Newman's thinking, coming directly in his words, I think is a better way to approach it.
Mr. Scanlon?
Well, it would sure make me feel a lot better to hear him publicly speak and let us know, because, I mean, we're not talking about some chump change, we're talking about a large amount of money. And also, for the record, it was brought to my attention that when people were testifying down there, this board did not pass 9-0. I was not in favor of this amendment. I voted against it because I have issues with where we are, and I don't believe the information's been brought to this board for us to make an educated decision. So, you know, I think that it was, you know, some folks that testified before did not, you know, state that it was an 8-1, you know, support of this amendment.
I did address that. I apologize. In my testimony, I said 9-0, but it was 8-1. Kramer did clarify that after I testified. I'm sorry, I cut off Ms. Merica. Ms. Merica.
It's okay. I wanted to address something you said, because it's something that we've heard from senators, and that is OPS taking responsibility and addressing the shortfall. And that's what this is doing. It's one way of taking responsibility and addressing the shortfall, because if we don't do something, the only way we're going to have to address it is to make cuts every single year based on what our projected arc is for the next year. And it's not a stable number. We won't know what it is from year to year. We could have a year with no arc. We could have a year with a gigantic arc, and we won't have a way of predicting that from year to year, where under this scenario, we would know the amount that we issued in bonds. We would know that amount. And as Mrs. Gotting said, you might have a year where there is a small additional arc because of fluctuation. You're likely to have years where there's not a significant arc on top of the bond payments that you're already making. And so I don't want people to think this is us not taking responsibility and doing something. This is one method of taking responsibility and doing something, so that we have that budget stability and we don't have those giant swings year to year and the unpredictability of what we'll be having to do.
Mr. Perlman.
You know, I appreciate both comments from Ms. Merica and Mr. Scanlon. I think if people are listening to us closely and hearing us get into the intricacies of the price of bricks, I think they should understand that we are taking our fiduciary responsibilities as serious as we ever have. And I think Mr. Scanlon's request is an indication of that. I'm not hearing blanket opposition, I'm hearing a request for more information. And I wish we would have had an opportunity to ask these questions. We did, but I don't think that we knew where we were going to be at today when the Nebraska Investment Council representative was here. So I agree. I think I think this bill does represent a great opportunity for savings, but that's a different and distinct question as to whether or not we have the information to make that decision right now. And I think time is of the essence. So I would agree with Mr. Scanlon, because I watched the testimony of the Nebraska Investment Council, and I watched him joke with the senators that he hopes that we get this done before the market corrects. So that's a real thing. That's a real concern. And so I would ask that we have him up here to inform the board exactly what this means. When I ask the questions, I'm not an expert, but I do want to know what it means when I'm asking questions about the probability of, or the likelihood, or however minute it is, that we're a loser on this, because that's the last thing we want. And maybe there is no probability or a 1% probability of that, and I don't think that we're going to get a specific number, but the entire board needs just a little education on what exactly this is, and considering this is a short session that ends April 18th, I think we're ready to hear that information as soon as possible.
I noted that on there, and when our board officers, we will discuss that on inviting Mr. Walton Newman back to the board for the March 5th meeting, if he's available. Ms. Gotti?
So I want to just point out what his role is. His role is to take the money that we give to him and invest it. His role isn't to advise us on what to do. And I think that's a really important distinction. His role is to take the money, not to advise us on moving forward with a bond or not. Our role is to figure out, based on the information that we have, whether or not it's in our best interest to do that. His email, I believe, and I haven't seen it either, and my conversation with him indicates that it can very well work. Again, it's always a matter of what the interest rate is, what the total is, etc. But what we do know is, and then the number that Mr. Lindsay pointed out, even after taking out interest at, say, 4.5%, the taxpayer still comes out ahead. Not huge, but even with additional ARC payments. So what we have to do is really dig into those numbers and understand them and make those decisions. My sense is, and I saw it even in the testimony, I mean, he's not telling the retirement committee what to do. He's just answering, hey, when you give me the money, I will invest it. He brought up the point that maybe you issue those bonds in small tranches over a period of time, just like you would personally if you were investing in a particular stock. You do that over a period of time. You don't oftentimes put all the money in at once. So there are different things that can happen. And I was watching the minutes from the Fed today too to see what guidance is happening out there. We just really don't know. I mean, they penciled in 3 interest rate increases in this year. We didn't see guidance today that it was going to change from that. So we just have to move ahead based on the information we have, knowing that it's our responsibility to be good stewards of the money we have, and recognizing, while we talk about cuts every year, there will be a cut that happens, and it will, in order to pay off principal and interest of a bond, it will last for the next 30 years. So those decisions will be long-term impact decisions, but the goal being, if we could get to a stable number so that we weren't increasing that number significantly every year, or allow specifically for a board to have 5 to 8 years of understanding with no ARC, and being able to work through the numbers and get to the place where future ARCs were reduced. So it's not an easy answer, and I'm not trying to discount what he would say to us, but it's basically what I've heard him say in front of the retirement committee, and his job is to invest and to take the money we give him that day.
Mr. Perlman?
Just very briefly, that's a very good point, Ms. Godding. You know, whether it's that gentleman or someone in the district, and I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but we need to hear from the experts either, well, I would say internally who do make those decisions and can guide us. But that's a very kind of good point that it's not his job to. But that's not to say that he doesn't have very valid and good information to share with this board that can help guide us. But I also want to hear from other people who can best advise us on what they think is best and the probability. So, yeah.
Mr. Scanlon?
And that's what I want to touch on. You know, if I'm going to take $10,000 and personally invest it, and then say, hey, I'm not investing any more in this year, is that a good manner or is that a bad manner? Should I invest $1,000, you know, each month, or should I do it in a lump sum? That's the type of thing that I think we need. Yeah, the investor's going to invest the money when you give it to them. The questions that we need to be asking are, when should we be giving it to you? How much should we be giving it to you? In what increments? And how do we minimize our risk, and how do we minimize any of the, you know, fluctuations of the market that we've been seeing? Those are questions that, you know, need to be answered before I can support and get an understanding of how this would be applied moving forward if this legislation were to pass. I want to hear from a financial advisor. None of us are financial advisors. That's where, you know, that's where I'm coming from.
Duly noted.
I just want to make a point, just to clarify. If this legislation does pass, then do we have the opportunity then to make those types of decisions that Mr. Scanlon's talking about? Would that be part of that process, the next step?
That depends on how the legislation is crafted. It certainly could, we could certainly approach the retirement committee to allow us to do things like a series, as Ms. Godding talked about, a series of tranches, which was one of the things Mr. Waldman Newman talked about, which was effectively, it would be dollar cost averaging, going in over time rather than trying to time the market, which you can't do. And so those kinds of things could be worked into legislation. Like I say, the retirement committee, I think wants to help OPS address the issue, and so those kinds of things I think could be helpful in doing that.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions or comments?
If I could, Mr. Snow, I forgot one bill that has a priority designation that
very important one.
RB 295. It's the Opportunity Scholarships Act. It basically allows tax credits for scholarship organizations. Those scholarship organizations would, basically a scholarship organization could be set up. Those scholarships pay tuition at private K-12 education, and the donations to those, for those scholarships would be subject to a tax credit of up to $10 million the first year and increasing by up to 25% a year above that. So it is, this board has this is a carryover bill from last year. The board took a position in opposition to the bill, and so we are working against that along with a whole host of public education supporters.
Mr. Perlman?
Just briefly, and sorry to put you on the spot, I'm just going off my memory here. I'm wondering if you can tell us the caps on the donations. I think personally, wasn't it 10,000, but corporates, was it 100,000?
It's big.
Right. The point being, the corporations could eat it up within like an hour or something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's, I'm looking to see if I have it, and I don't have that detail in there.
If you could over the next several days, I mean, I don't need it this second, but.
Yeah, I can get those
Thanks.
and shoot those out, and get it to Mr. Ray and get it out to the board.
Is it still 10 million cap?
It's capped at 10 million, and it increases. The following year, it would be 125% of contributions, that the credits that were actually taken.
Right.
So it would increase, assuming it was maxed out, it would increase from 10 million to 12.5 million the following year, and could continue to increase.
Thanks.
All righty. Thank you so much, Mr.
Thank
Lindsay. Up next is committees of the board update. Mr. Scanlon. It's listed as an action item, but there was no action needed to be taken, if I'm correct. They always list it as an, go ahead.
During the legislative session, we always put the legislative update under action in case we do need to change our position on a bill or take a position on an amendment to a bill, because there could be a bill that we support and we've supported for a year and a half, and then there's an amendment on the floor that completely changes it, and we need to oppose it then. So we always leave it as an action item so that we have that flexibility to, if we need to change our position, if we need to take a new position, we can do that at that meeting.
All righty, moving on to J2A. I think the first one on there is Board Governance Committee. Ms. Merica?
We were scheduled to meet on the 15th, but we're not able to due to some scheduling issues that came up with the majority of the committee, and we are working on rescheduling that meeting. So we'll have an update next time.
Thank you. Budget and Audit, Ms. Scotting?
So we have not met as a budget committee because there's been the ongoing Budget Advisory Committee, and so we're kind of in a holding pattern. We probably will meet. Mrs. Kanoki and I have talked about that, but we haven't set a date yet.
Thank you. Policy Committee, Mr. Perlman?
Yes, just briefly, we met, I think it was last week. Was it last week? February 12th. We're working on just making a slight alteration to a policy that governs organizational charts of the district and how those are requested and distributed. You know, again, we're working on tightening our belts. Again, in that policy, we're in collaboration with the Board Governance Committee. We're looking at ways to spend less on board travel and board conferences. We want to make sure we do it the right way, not just cut a budget just to cut a budget like we would with any other area. But we're looking at tighter belt there. I think the spending on travel for this board has decreased every year over the past several years, and we're looking to see if we can tighten that even more. So we're working on finalizing that. And we're also continuing discussions on a policy focused on transgender students and teachers and staff, and that's a continuing discussion. And we will meet again. We were scheduled to meet, I think, in whatever the day was. It was during spring break, so we're probably going to push that back a week or two.
Thank you. Americanism Committee, Dr. Holman and Ms. Ryan?
I'm going to speak for my team today. So the Americanism Committee met on February 13th. Mr. Barry Thomas gave an overview of the establishment of the Americanism Committee as a result of a state statute 79-724. With that, there is an instructional requirement for teaching about American citizenship, patriotism, and civic duty. He went on to share with us also that 2 legislative bills came about in 2016 and 2017, which proposed to mandate Nebraska high school students to pass a naturalization test before graduating to demonstrate their civic readiness. And so there were lots of concerns and discussion in a hearing regarding that, and the bills never made it out of the Education Committee. So from there were 3 strategic goals that were developed, and those goals were, I'm just going to read them to you. Create a framework that identifies evidence acceptable for the demonstration of competencies in social studies, and from this, a definition of civic readiness was created. Number 2, improve instruction within social studies, formed around content, pedagogy, and connections. And then number 3, develop a best practices repository.
So there were 3 planning teams that worked on these 3 goals, and the definition of civic readiness was developed, and there was opposition due to some of the verbiage that was used in the definition. And so in January 2018, a new draft of the definition was developed, and it went to hearing early February 2018, and we're waiting to hear back about that. So we'll update you later once we know more. Thank you.
Thank you. Student assignment plan, Ms. Gadding.
We've been waiting until all the student assignment plan, or all the students have picked their schools that they want to attend, so we will probably be meeting shortly. We kind of decided we didn't have a lot to cover yet.
Thank you. Legislative Committee, Ms. Merica.
You've all just kind of heard our update. Like I said, we're still meeting every Friday, so if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to a committee member, to reach out to John Urbershall with our contracted lobbyists, because they can also provide information. And as Mr. Lindsay said, the tax credit scholarship bill did have a prioritization. There are several coalitions that are forming of people who are concerned about the impact that would have, because we know the tax credits would get maxed out. And that would take $10 million from our state budget when we already have a state budget fiscal crisis in our state. So while it doesn't change the TIOSA formula, it does change how much money is available to be allocated to public education. So I would just be watching for that information, and we'll keep you up to date as things move rapidly ahead.
Thank you. CM at R and CBOC, Mr. Scanlon. Oh. CBOC. I put them both the same. Aren't you on?
I'm not on the Construction Manager at Risk
Okay.
Committee.
Sorry.
I can do CBOC.
CBOC, sorry.
Okay.
I apologize.
CBOC is meeting next Wednesday. Continue to oversee the ongoing projects and getting updates. There is a receipt of reports for the CBOC Phase 1 update. If anybody has any questions, I can field those questions. And
Thank you, Mr. Scanlon. If you guys look at your receipt of reports, there's a CBOC Phase 1 update from January. There's nothing else on the agenda. Ms. Merica?
I move that the Board of Education go into closed session for the protection of the public interest and for the prevention of needless injury to the reputation of individuals, to discuss with the superintendent, secretary to the board, John Lindsay, Connie Kanoki, Dr. Turnquist, and legal counsel, negotiations, pending litigation, strategy session related to legislation, and legal advice.
There's a motion on the floor to go into closed session. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Merica, second by Ms. Ryan. Any discussions? Roll call, please.
Smith? Aye. Snow?
Aye.
Cassidy?
Aye.
Gadding?
Aye.
Hallman?
Aye.
America?
Aye.
Perlman?
Aye.
Ryan?
Aye.
Scanlon?
Aye.
9-9.
Motion carries. Let me remind the board that the purpose for closed session is for the protection of the public interest and for the prevention of needless injury to the reputation of individuals, to discuss with the superintendent, secretary to the board, John Lindsay, Connie Kanoki, Dr. Turnquist, and legal counsel. Negotiations, pending litigation, strategy session related to legislation and advice. Let the record reflect that the board went into closed session at 8:35.